What is a true fact that sounds like a conspiracy theory? The dolphin LSD experiment. NASA put a woman in a room that was flooded up to her hips and let a dolphin loose in there to live with her in order to attempt to teach the dolphin to speak English, and LSD was later used on the dolphin to see if it had some kind of reaction and if it affected its speech lessons. Saddam Hussein was given the key to the city of Detroit. The reason only the orange variety of carrots is widely available is because the Dutch like the color orange. They leveraged their powerful trade networks to make it so. The CIA ran experiments with LSD at McGill University in Montreal. The US conducted a fake vaccination drive to find Osama bin Laden. The US government forcibly sterilized minorities until the 1970s. 25-50% of Native American women were sterilized between 1970 and 1976. Some women were told they couldn't receive welfare unless they were sterilized first. Some were told they would no longer receive health care if they refused. Some women were told that the procedure was reversible when it was not. Some women went to the hospital for something like a tonsillectomy and were given hysterectomies while they were unconscious. It's amazing to me that this isn't widely known. The egg industry as a whole embarked on a 2-year war on a single vegan mayo brand. The US government tested drugs and chemical weapons on its own soldiers and various animals during the Cold War at the Edgewood Arsenal facility. It's also where we got bulletproof vests and some vaccines. If you want to ruin your day, look up Bad Trip to Edgewood. The Hawaiian royalty was toppled by a fruit company, Dole. The monster study was a stuttering experiment performed on 22 orphan children in Davenport, Iowa in 1939. It was conducted by Wendell Johnson at the University of Iowa. Graduate student Mary Tudor conducted the experiment under Johnson's supervision. Half of the children received positive speech therapy, praising the fluency of their speech, and the other half, negative speech therapy, belittling the children for speech imperfections. Many of the normal speaking orphan children who received negative therapy in the experiment suffered negative psychological effects, and some retained speech problems for the rest of their lives. The FBI was constantly stalking Ernest Hemingway, and that led to his suicide. The CIA has a real deal heart attack gun. It was exposed to the public in the 70s. The Nayara testimony that built public support for the is to back Kuwait in the Gulf War 1992. TLDR, a 15-year-old girl testified to the Congressional Human Rights Caucus that she had witnessed Iraqi soldiers take babies out of incubators and leave them in the floor to die. This was widely publicized in the US and essentially led to the US's involvement in the Gulf War. It was later discovered the girl was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the US, and the whole thing was organized by a US marketing company to generate outrage against Iraq. Operation Paperclip. Recruit Nazi scientists and insert them into key government tech operations after WWII. This is how the world transitioned from the German Vita rocket to NASA and the ICBM in the span of 30 years. The FBI sent an anonymous letter to Martin Luther King Jr. The US government pardoned hundreds of Japanese war criminals who did things that would have made Joseph Mengele blush in exchange for their research on biological warfare that they conducted on live human subjects. In 1999, Russia killed 300 of its own innocent citizens and injured 1,000 more through a series of terror bombings of apartment buildings. The goal was to motivate public support for a war in Chechnya and to bring Vladimir Putin to power. It worked. Some of the perpetrators were caught red-handed by local law enforcement. After they were caught and identified as federal agents, the FSB said it had been a training exercise. The evidence is considerable and damning. Divulging details about the plan is also the reason Litvinenko was poisoned. Project Northwoods. JFK was proposed an idea from the CIA in which they would rain terror on the American people via random terrorist attacks, military ships being sunk, and plane hijackings in which they would blame on Cuba and therefore get the public behind the idea to go to war with Cuba. Thankfully, JFK declined. Years ago, the big light bulb, as I like to call them, decided to purposefully turn down the lifespan of light bulbs to sell more, and the companies who didn't agree were alienated from trading with primary sources for light bulbs. Both the US and Russia used dolphins and whales to spy on countries. Edit. The US also uses seals as in the animals for protection at some of their marine bases. Not really a conspiracy, but I recently read that the Department of Navy and ARPA released tour to the general public so people could create enough noise to mask the real agents who would need it. During Prohibition, the US government added poisons to industrial alcohols because they were being chemically modified for consumption. This resulted in many deaths that the government justified by saying the dead had been breaking the law. Basically, the CIA wanted to put microphones and transmitters inside of cats and use them to spy on the Soviets in the 1960s. It cost about $20 million and was a huge failure. Allegedly. The first attempt at this resulted in the cat running out into the street and getting run over by a car almost immediately. Recently declassified documents show that the CIA had at least some involvement in the coup d'etat that overthrew Chilean President Salvador Allende. During the coup, not only was Allende's palace bombed, but 40,000 leftists were taken to the National Football Stadium where they were tortured for months. It was a prison camp. Thousands of people were killed or disappeared. Allende's replacement? Augusto Pinochet. I know that the consequences of the coup were out of the hands of the US. But the domino effect of these actions is still crazy to me. America didn't want to say they lost the Vietnam War, so they sent troops there for 6 more years even though according to them it was impossible to win. This was in the Pentagon Papers. Also the entirety of the USA Patriot Act of 2001. The British government covered up a huge pedophile ring consisting of numerous government officials. Lobsters can't actually die of old age because they have an enzyme that replicates some of their DNA or whatever throughout their life, but they can die of anything else, for example, disease, consumption, etc. So if you think about it, there really could be just a huge ass lobster like the size of a VW bug chilling in the middle of the Atlantic or even bigger. Nestle is pretty much a supervillain. The guy that made the hydrogen car driving across country on water got increasing paranoid he was going to get killed. Called his mother, said if anything happens to me the government did it. Dies right after in a diner puking black liquid. Then the hiding of the Chevy Volt. Starfish's mouths are located on the center of their bodies. And in most mermaid movies they use starfish to cover their boobies. Pretty weird, man. What's going on there, ya know? The summer before the Salem withdrawals was very warm and moist, the perfect conditions for ergot to grow. A very real possibility is that everyone was tripping balls on a component of LSD and accusing each other of being witches. Bedbugs can lie dormant for up to 24 months without food. They are out to get us all, man. They have evolved over time and can survive the most extreme elements. That and crows have facial recognition. They remember you. Sounds totally out there, but it's true. Edit 1. Well damn. Thanks all. Crows are indeed mysterious birds. I jotted what I could down of the story on Halloween morning. Full stop. Crows are terrifying. Fixed a grammar issue. Edit 2. Why this is a conspiracy, because they sound like a government experiment gone wrong. Superbugs that can't be killed by most pesticides and can live for 2 years without food. Birds that can recognize you. Travel in murders and stalk you. Sounds very sea-fish to me. Neil Armstrong had to fill out an immigration form when he arrived back to the US from the moon. Mars is completely populated by alien robots. There is a high security vault somewhere in the frozen tundra. I seriously think it is in Antarctica. That is full of seeds. Just seeds of almost every known plant species. Donated by world governments. In case an apocalypse event happens and we need to repopulate that one type of grape.